Morning class. Today we will going to start our second chapter of your book Political Theory, and the name of the chapter is Freedom. Now think of a situation that constitution provides you all the basic values, all those ideals and principles that you will need to develop your life, or that you will need to fulfill your all aspirations and needs. But on the contrary, think of the situation that you don't have any access to use all those facilities, all those values. Then what will be the worth of all those values, all those principles that you claim for yourself? So this is how, or in this context, we will understand the meaning of freedom, the views of great personalities, and then we will see to which extent society allows us to access our freedom, or can we enjoy absolute liberty, or are there any sources of limitation, constraint on our freedom? So let us see. Human history provides many examples of people and communities which have been dominated or enslaved or exploited by more powerful groups. But it also provides us with inspiration examples of heroic struggles against such domination. What is this freedom for which people have been willing to sacrifice and die? In its essence, the struggle for freedom represents the desire of people to be in control of their own lives and destinies, and to have the opportunity to express themselves freely through their choices and activities. Not just individuals but societies also value their independence and wish to protect their culture and future. So all this situation thinks about the meaning, that what is this freedom all about, that people are willingly to die. However, the given diverse interests and ambitions of people, any form of social living requires some rules and regulations. These rules may require some constraints to be imposed on the freedom of individuals, but it is recognized that such constraint may also free us from insecurity and provide us with the conditions in which we can develop ourselves. In political theory, much of the discussion regarding freedom has therefore focused on trying to evolve principles by which we can distinguish between socially necessary constraints and other restrictions. There has also been debate about possible limitations on freedom which may result from the social and economic structures of a society. So the debate and discussion about what is freedom, what are the constraints should be there on the freedom, to which extent these constraints be imposed. So we are going to discuss about all these things in this chapter. Before we set out to answer these questions that we have discussed in the previous line, let us stop and consider some of them stories of the great persons of the 20th century. So, first we have Nelson Mandela, who had written a book, autobiography, titled Long Walk to Freedom. In this book, he talks about his personal struggle against the apartheid regime in South Africa, about the resistance of his people to the segregation policy of the white regime, about the humiliations, hardships, and policies that made them suffer a lot. These ranged from being bundled into townships and being denied easy movement about the country, to being denied a free choice of whom to marry. Collectively, such measures constituted a body of constraint imposed by the apartheid regime that discriminated between citizens based on their race. For Mandela and his fellow people, it was the struggle against such unjust constraint, the struggle to remove the obstacles to the freedom of all the people of South Africa, not just the black or the colored, but also the white people, and that was the long walk to freedom. For this freedom, you must be knowing this, Mandela spent 28 years of his life in jail. And imagine what it means to give one's youth for an ideal, to voluntarily give up the pleasure of talking with one's friends, of one playing one's favorite game. Mandela loved boxing and of wearing favorite clothes, of listening to one's favorite music, of enjoying the many festivals that are part of one's life. Imagine giving up all these and choosing instead to be locked up alone in a room, not knowing when one would be released, not because one campaigned for the freedom of one's people. For freedom, Mandela paid a very high personal price. So true. To overthrow the unjust constraint of the white regime, he spent 28 years of his life, and even without knowing that when he would be released. So this is the price he paid for the freedom. So you can understand how important is freedom for not only one individual, but for the entire society, for the entire people to develop their own personality. Now we have another case, and this case, the person in this case is inspired by Gandhi's thought of non-violence, and that person's name is Aung San Suu Kyi. As he remains under house arrest in Myanmar, separated from children, unable to visit her husband when he was dying of cancer, because he afraid that if she left Myanmar to visit him in England, he would not be able to return. Aung San Suu Kyi sees her freedom as connected to the freedom of her people. Her book of essays bears the title freedom from fear. She says, for me, real freedom is freedom from fear. And unless you cannot live free from your fear, you cannot live a dignified human life. These are deep thoughts that led us to pause and think about their implications. We must not, her words suggest, be afraid of the opinions of other people, or of the attitude of authority, or of the reactions of the members of our society to the things we want to do, or of the reaction of our peers, or of speaking our mind. Yet we find that we often exhibit such fear. For her, a dignifying human life requires us to able to overcome such fear. And from these two books of Nelson Mandela and Aung San Suu Kyi, we can see the power of the ideal of freedom, an ideal that was at the center of our national struggle also, and the struggle of the peoples of Asia and Africa against British, French and Portuguese colonialism. So you can think that to different people, perception differs with the term freedom, but it is as necessary, as important for each section of society. So after studying the two stories about Nelson Mandela and Aung San Suu Kyi, we have very important question in front of us. That is, what is freedom? So you can say that a simple answer to this question is absence of constraint. Freedom is said to exist when external constraints on the individual are absent. In terms of this definition, an individual could be considered free if she is not subject to external controls and is able to make independent decisions and act in an autonomous way. So what you can say, freedom for me, for you, for anybody, freedom is absence of constraint. Simply means that you are free from any limitation, any restrictions, and also you are free to make independent decisions, and also that is in a autonomous way. You are free. However, absence of constraint is only one dimension of freedom. Freedom is also about expanding the ability of people to freely express themselves and develop their potential. Freedom in this sense is the condition in which people can develop their creativity and capabilities. Both these aspects of freedom, the absence of external constraint as well as the existence of conditions in which people can develop their talents, are important. So we can say that a free society would be one which enables all its members to develop their potential with the minimum of social constraint. So what is freedom? Freedom is absence of constraint, and with that it provides us with the condition to enhance the ability to express ourselves, develop our potential, creativity, and all these together will help us to develop our self, and all these things can be possible in a free society. which enable all its members to develop their potential with minimum constraint, or you can say that with minimum social constraint. Do you think that absence of constraint or limitation or restriction on the individual is good when we are living together in a society? Let's see. No individual living in society can hope to enjoy total absence of any kind of constraints or restriction. Why? It is very important to determine which social constraints are justified and which are not, which are acceptable and which should be removed. To understand which social constraints are necessary, we need to look at the core relationship between the individual and the society within which he or she is placed. That is, we need to examine the relationship between individual and society. We would need to see which features of the society allow the individual to choose, to decide, or to act, and which do not. We would need to determine which features are desirable and which are not, which should be removed and which should not. So these are the questions we need to understand in context of the word constraint. Then which are desirable, which are not, which should be there and which should be removed. Further, we need to see if the principles which we use to differentiate necessary from unnecessary constraints also apply to the relationship between the individual and groups and nation. Thus far, we have defined freedom as absence of constraint. To be free means to reduce or minimize social constraint that limit our ability to make choices freely. However, this is only one aspect of freedom. To put it in another way, freedom has a positive dimension as well. To be free, a society must widen the area in which individuals, groups, communities, or nation will able to decide their own destiny and be what they wish to be. Freedom in this sense allows the full development of individuals' creativity, sensibilities, and capabilities, be it in sports, science, art, music, or exploration. So, freedom means free from the or minimum or reduce social constraint. And when you are free, that should help you to develop your ability, your creativity, your talent. You can choose whatever you wish to do, whatever you want to become. That should be your freedom, autonomous decision of individual. So what is the core relationship between the individual and society, and how society helps individual to attain freedom? So we can say that a free society is one that enables one to pursue one's interest with minimum of constraints. Freedom is considered as valuable because it allows us to make choices and to exercise our judgment. It permits the exercise of the individual's powers of reason and judgment. When we talk about the freedom as a concept in Indian political thought, we termed it as Swaraj. The term Swaraj incorporates within it two words. Swa means self and Raj means rule. It can be understood to mean both the rule of the self and rule over the self. Swaraj, in the context of the freedom struggle in India, referred to freedom as a constitutional and political demand and as a value at the social collective level. That is why Swaraj was such an important term used in the freedom movement, inspiring Tilak's famous statement, Swaraj is my birthright and I shall have it. It is the understanding of Swaraj as rule over the self was highlighted by Mahatma Gandhi in his work Hind Swaraj, where he states, it is Swaraj when we learn to rule ourselves. Swaraj is not just freedom but liberation and redeeming one's self-respect, self-responsibility and capacities for self-realization. Understanding the real self and its relation to communities and society, it is critical to project of attaining Swaraj. Swaraj believed the development that follows would liberate both individual and collective potentialities guided by the principle of justice. Such an understanding is as relevant to the 21st century as it was when Gandhiji wrote the Hind Swaraj in 1909. So this is what Indian thought to freedom, that is Swaraj. And it talks about that to rule the self or rule over the self. So let us recapitulate what we have discussed in today's class. We talked about the stories of the great personalities, that why freedom should be considered as a valuable concept or a valuable demand for the society as well as for the individual. And then we discussed about the meaning of term freedom. Freedom is absence of constraint, limitation or restrictions. But this is the one aspect of freedom. Freedom with constraint gives us condition to develop ourself, our creativity, our talent, our potentials, and that can only be happen in a free society. So society also plays an important role by providing you the condition to develop yourself. And then we talked about the Indian political thought of freedom, that is discussed in Hind Swaraj by Mahatma Gandhi, that Swaraj means to rule the self and rule over the self, to understand the relationship between the communities and society. It's really important to understand one's duty, one's respect and one's responsibility, and that also helps us to understand the true meaning of freedom. So that's all for today. Based on today's video, there are some assignment questions, that what is meant by freedom? Is there any relationship between freedom for individual and freedom for the nation? What is the title of Nelson Mandela's autobiography? What is a free society? Who is the author of the book Freedom from Fear? What are the different dimensions of freedom? And what is Swaraj according to Mahatma Gandhi? So thank you student, and have a nice day ahead.